All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm here with Ari, Nazem, and Tucker Walsh, and I'm really excited. We're here today to explore this mystery of what is soul. And my hope is that we can uh, explore together and be inspired by some of the symbols that come from Chinese wisdom, Chinese medicine, Chinese language. I find that these symbols they act as a kind of a mythopoetic kind of awakener, um, and invite us to dream into some possibilities and sense into some things that human beings have access to. And um, so I'm looking forward for us to dive into all this. Maybe to get us started, I'll start with just a little bit of context, and then I'll share a character, and then we'll see where we go. Because the thing is that at least from what I've learned, there isn't one like Chinese character for soul per se. There's a number of characters that some of which could be translated as soul, but it means something different than another character that could be translated as soul. And that really there's a confluence of, uh, for lack of a better term, cosmic streams that kind of come together in the human heart. Um, that as we try to make meaning, we might look at that thing that we see and say, oh, that must be soul. But from an Eastern perspective, there's a lot of territory that's coming together. There's sort of a relational, ecological aspect um, that gives us this thing we call soul. So I'll just start with um, this fun image here. Uh, this is looking at the cosmos, the evolving cosmos, and um, based.
Alexander, the recording might also just appear on audio only formats, and so maybe for those that are just listening to also describe the image.
Yeah. So what we have here is we have three circles that are stacked on top of each other, and then there's a central pathway that's moving through it. It might look like uh, a vertical pathway, and indeed it is, but within that pathway, there's a squiggling line that makes me so happy every time I see this image. That is winding and curling and cueling and moving every which way as a way to just remind us that the developmental unfolding is while we can look at it as a set of stairs, we can also look at it as a as a grand fashioned mess that's moving in all sorts of directions, and there's an artistic gesture in it. And the bottom circle is reflective of the realm of matter. This is, if we go back for a while, 14 or so billion years, there could be things before that. We don't know. Um, we can sort of recognize this as the foundation of the cosmos as we know it. And then there's the realm of life. At some point, mysteriously, there was an explosion where there began to be wiggling beasts. Of course, at first they were primitive organisms, and then they became bigger beasts and bigger beasts and bigger beasts. And then at some point, we burst again into what I like to call the sacred gap. Some people will call this the noosphere, which is a great word, but I always feel like I've got a bunch of marbles in my mouth when I try to say it. And but we're talking here about a gap that opens, usually like late, I don't know, like a year old, year and a half, it starts to open more and more and more. And by 2 years old, this gap is really beginning to open up where there's a space between the knower and the known. We can reflect. And as we reflect this great gesture, this story uh, this story begins, the human story. I'm sure there's other beings that we don't know of that also have a sacred gap, but we'll hang out with the humans for now. And so it's in this gap that we ask questions like, what's a soul? And we're this one way to look at it is like we're this really uh, old unfolding gesture, this cosmic unfolding, and we've started to ask ourselves, who are we and why are we here, and all those kinds of questions. And today we'll explore what is the soul. And to start with, I wanted to share a Chinese character. This is the character for Shen. I think I'll start before I talk about any translations. I'm not going to do that because I think it's a little more interesting when we don't have a specific uh, translation. And so on this side, we have here, it was a lightning bolt. In fact, the earliest character for Shen shows a lightning bolt striking a human being. But later on, the most common earliest depiction of this whole character is just this here. It's a lightning bolt. So we have this idea that there's something that uh, is descending from the heavens, some sort of a numinous uh, light. Um, of course, if you're struck by lightning, I assume that you must have, at least metaphorically, you feel enlivened by the light. It's probably a little more complicated when it's actual lightning. And then on this side, we have this other character that it shows a single line. We could suggest that this line reflects an unbroken, timeless dimension of being. And then we have hanging from this light are these three descending lines. If you look at an earlier version of this, it's a little easier to kind of see when it's not in the pretty sort of gestures. But you can see a single line above, and then you see there's something hanging. So in the Buddhist tradition, we might say that this single unbroken line reflects the Dharmakaya, the sort of the unbroken dimensions of awareness. And then what's hanging from it are these fruits of heaven. You can think of that as the Sambhogakaya. There's something, there's a luminosity that is pouring. The only other thing I'll mention, and then we'll open up to explore a little bit, is um, this character here. You can see some resemblance to the original, to the one that's painted here, but it also shows these hands that are they're stretching something. And the idea here is in autumn, the idea is that nature has to do this stretching gesture uh, to press the maturation into the seeds so that when the seeds fall, they have the essence in them. So there's also this imagery of implications of a kind of maturation and like the pressing of the essence into the seed, which allows that seed to then, it has life in it. It has animating forces in it. So I'll just stop there for now and just see what comes up for you guys so far.
Mhm. Mm. Thanks, Alexander. Yeah, I really love the lightning strike and the seeds. And for me, soul is very sexy.
Mhm.
It's very sexual. It's very erotic. It's the creative life force in many ways. I have a mentor of mine, and we were dialoguing about soul. It's not a term that he uses, and he was saying for him maybe soul is something like deepest heart. And while I appreciate deepest heart, like there's that feels like maybe everything ultimately is the deepest heart. There's a quality in that for me, even just from the phenomenology of deepest heart, that I feel like is missing when the word soul gets removed. There's something about soul that sounds like a soul. And I feel it in more in my lower chakras. 2 nights ago, I was watching Alicia Keys perform on Tiny Desk, the NPR Tiny Desk concerts, which I used to film as an intern at NPR in college. And I was just like, man, this woman and her whole band are like, this is mastery of heart and soul. But to me, that there was a distinction when I used those two terms because heart was like the radiance. It was like the just glowing love that was just pouring through her and through all the musicians, through the music itself. But then soul was like the like spunk. It was like the funk. It was like the thing that's like a little messy, a little bit raw, a little bit like It was like it had like a depth dimension that I feel in the lower chakras of my body and like my yeah, like where my sex organs are. You know, like I feel it as sexual. And I don't think that's explicit. I don't think that's the only way that soul can be expressed or experienced. But as an art school grad, I tend to often like view the world through frames or metaphors of art. And for me, soul and art are very like the best art that I know or that I'm drawn towards is just basically painting with soul in whatever medium that might appear. And then of course we can look at all of reality itself as God's painting of soul on the canvas of Dharmakaya, maybe. So yeah, that's what comes up for me.
Yeah, that those those two images, I would say, are images that come to me a lot too, like the lightning bolt and the seed as holding yeah, as holding different kind of dimensions of how I experience soul. Um, I think, it's funny, yeah, people always ask me if I'm a musician or an actor or something like that, or people say I should be an actor, but they think I'm a musician when they see me. But it's interesting because, yeah, I guess one of the frames that resonates the most with me about soul is kind of the dramatic frame, like almost like a theatrical frame. And in a lot of my more esoteric lightning bolt downloads, I've experienced reality as being very theatrical, um, made out of story, as John Churchill has said before. And given that the human body is kind of it has its own story. It has its own yeah, there's almost these layers that have their own desire to unfold. Like there's the tree that starts as a seed and wants to unfold into a full oak tree. But then there's also the part of the branch that turns into the blossom that turns into the fruit. You could say that's kind of a micro, like there's a specific directionality of that stem or that branch that is kind of more unique than like the flowering of the whole tree. And the fruits come out a little different, but they're also part of this fractal unfolding, which is the tree from the one step from the one seed. And I feel like that, yeah, when we talk about soul, it's almost like which soul, because my human body has its own desires, right? And then you could even break that into the organ systems having their own subminds, and they have their own unfoldings they wish to accomplish. My generative organs certainly disagree sometimes with my heart or my cognitive mind about what direction we should be using the energy of our system. And then there might be something even behind the physical organism that's trying to push itself, that kind of, yeah, push itself through the physical organism. Um, and that maybe is what we'd commonly call soul, is like some sort of descending impulse. Yeah, sometimes I think of it as like coming up through me or down through me. But a higher order whole that is part of some larger ecology that is trying to birth itself through my physical body into the physical world. Um, yeah, and that can feel like lightning. That can feel like when, yeah, recently Tucker and I made a big decision, and that moment felt kind of like lightning. There was like this polarized charge that was coming as we were discussing, and things were kind of clicking into place, and you could feel almost like a defibrillator humming, like and then at one moment it kind of just snaps, and it's like, whoa, this higher order whole has descended. I don't understand it fully. I'm still in the process of unpacking it a week later, but it's like something happens in that moment where, yeah,
Yeah, beautiful. um, I'm inspired by what both of you are sharing, um, as it's describing some of the next layer of gestures that um, sort of support the mosaic of what is soul. And uh, you're describing the sense of this descent. And there's a way in which that this character, Shen, the first character that I shared, there's a transpersonal quality to it. Or maybe a better word than transpersonal is there's a universal quality to it. There's the sun shining radiance that is like shining light onto everyone. And we can say that that must be a part of the soul, but it's not all of the soul because there's something that's not yet sort of individualized about it. But when we look at this next character, Ling, what we see here is a beautiful depiction of a description of how a symbolic description of the process. So often I think the word soul, what is the soul? It sort of invokes a noun-like question, but I wonder about looking at the soul more as a series of processes that are sort of coming into contact with each other. And this image, what this shows at the bottom, is the character for wizard or shaman. And it shows essentially two female shamans that are doing a rain dance. And so this character has three components, a heaven component, a human component, and an earth component, a terrestrial component. So on the earth, the terrestrial component, there's these two female shamans that are doing a rain dance. And you can also see this other character for work. There's a sense that they're engaging in a ritual or in a practice that has an intention to do something. And what that something is these are three mouths that are right above this character for shaman. So they're engaging in this rain dance, which the idea here is that it's not just that you do these physical movements and then the rain falls, but your heart has to be in a particular disposition in order to receive and magnetically evoke the rain. And so you have these mouths that are wide open. And what are they wide open to? This is the top part of the character, the canopy of heaven. And so from heaven, there's this raining down. There's this raining down of these animating forces, luminous, this luminous impulse. And now the thing is when we compare this character with the Shen, this character is more yin, right? In the character for Shen, we see these sort of, I like to call them these like luminous fruits that are hanging from heaven, or the Samboka Kaya luminosity is descending like lightning from this timeless, boundless field of potentiality. So it's more bright. This is a yin attractor. It's the quality of presence in the body that calls down the rain. Now the cool thing is, and you both may have experienced this. I've only experienced this in Boulder, where it can rain and be sunny at the exact same time. It's very weird. It's very weird. But the idea here is that when the rain is descending and you see the sun is way up in the sky, but the rain, it captures the sun. You can see it because you look at the raindrops and you see the light inside of it. Or you look at the puddles on the ground and you see the sun inside of it. And so the implication here with Ling is that kind of gesture where somehow the heavens are coming to earth or coming through the human heart. And this gets us um, a little bit closer to this sort of personalized, the through you. There's that light is now coming through something in particular.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often talk about there, like feeling that there's two ways in which knowing sometimes arises, and more the soul depth dimension. And one is that transpersonal kind of download from the heavens, the lightning strike. And yeah, it's almost like the full non-conceptual knowing is there without any thinking or thought, or it's really not mental. It's like awareness itself is aware of the totality of it, even as it doesn't know it at all from a mental cognitive perspective. But then I think there's another dimension that is equally as important. And often when the two are combined, it feels like the fullest expression of um, soul is experienced for me, which is when it's almost like the planet or the earth or the nature or the soil or the mycelium or the cells also are knowing, and that's more like from the ground up, almost as if I'm a flower and I'm sucking up the rain from the soil. And so it's not just raining from the heavens, but it's also like the rain that's in the soil is being sucked up, and it's a little bit slower of a process, but it's almost like it's working on deeper layers of the material realm or energetic realm. It's like it has a quality of purification sometimes, but it's also it's like it's very gestural, it's very physical, it's very energetic, and just as mysterious. Yeah, and there's sometimes a quality of feeling like the clear knowing is there, but then the body kind of comes into, it's like it's rebirthed into a form that can receive that clear knowing, and then that's expressed as action from the heart, the human heart, or from the more than human heart as well. But yeah, and so yeah, just feeling the ecological. I mean, it could be framed as so many different ways, but I like to frame it in a planetary context because I think that it um, invites in something that feels universal to humans. Like all humans can relate to being a being of the planet and like receiving the information about what is ours to occupy as an expression of this planet, what is ours to live, to serve, to tend to, and who do we need to become as a unfolding process to meet that um, clarity, or that mystery that's not clear but is like sparkling in little fractal moments of clarity, you could say.
Yeah, as you're speaking, it reminds me of the sort of paired gestures of like the involutionary gestures and the evolutionary gestures,
Hmm.
and that imagery of like pressing the animation into the seed. It gives that's the involutionary gesture,
Hmm.
but then that seed now has the essences and it falls to the ground when the fruit falls from the tree. Um, and then it sort of burrows into the earth. And
Hmm.
at some point, with the right conditions, there's a kind of that evolutionary. It's like the movement from earth to heaven. But you're
Hmm.
carrying the earth within you, like you're carrying
Hmm.
this world within you, as well as sort of connecting with the heavens. And it reminds me, Ari, of what you were sharing around. Um, for me, also, one of the places that I really feel this, what I would sort of call the sense of soul, is in the arts. And you also are mentioning this too, Tucker, where it's like people are on the earth and they're living through human experience and the earthly experience, but they're like wielding something that feels like it's beyond here. It's like it's not just stones and dirt, but it is. It is. And there's just something so beautiful about that, this sort of marriage of heaven and earth.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, one of the images that was coming up, Tucker and Alexander, as you were speaking about the refraction of the sun and the raindrops, is one of the first ways that soul showed itself to me, or that way of relating to my beingness or experience was kind of captured in image was almost like the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon cover. Um, just because that's very common in popular culture, but the concept of a prism, like raindrops are these prisms that are reflecting the one light, the sun, but they're all, snowflakes, raindrops, they're all kind of unique. They're in a position at a time. They are cloudy or clear. And almost like, yeah, sometimes it feels like my body is sometimes we might use the word vessel, or we might use the word container or alchemical system or furnace, but some sort of a receptacle that can be very clear and very open to that which wants to come through it, and the light that is shining into it being able to kind of blossom out and refract out, or it's very contracted or looping or opaque, and you can hit it with, lightning and nothing's going to come out the other side. Um, and yeah, I think when, like you were saying, Tucker, when I feel someone is like breathing soul into the world, it feels like they're open and clear, and something is coming through them that is beyond them. It's being expressed uniquely through their body, and they're catching it, and there's something unique about that. But something is coming through that is beyond them, and you can almost feel it, like how much of it is like the animal guy, or how much of it is a smaller self, and how much of it is like a deeper self or a deeper heart, or a the transmission is the degree to which it's beyond. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that, Ari, in the sense of, I think in Buddhist circles that I'm in, or in meta-aware kind of developmental circles or whatnot, there's a tendency towards deconstructing and seeing like, oh, soul is this. Ultimately, it's all just sort of the radiance of awakening, whatever the story is. And but I think there's a function that I just keep coming back to soul as a word, as a way of experiencing. And it's just like I guess I just have a love affair with soul, and I think I always have since I was a little kid. Because to me, yeah, it does help to sort of distinguish like the relative depth dimension of where something is birthing from or expressing as. And I don't know. I was watching the Knicks, the Knicks just won the NBA finals, and just seeing the mastery of the craft of playing basketball at that elite level, and then seeing the sports announcers and all the fans, and the kind of the mythos of like the Knicks haven't won in 50 years or whatever it is. And there's just something about that where, to me, in this moment in my life, I'm not making this as a truth claim about reality, but in this moment of my life, I find way more depth of connection to soul, to heart, to God, like watching the next game than I do just kind of like, I don't know, meditating or some other, spiritual practice, like formal spiritual practice. It's sometimes, yeah, right now in my life, like some of the things that I've often used as a vehicle towards soul feel the most dry. And then soul is this most potent and alive in the simplicity of the meal that I'm eating, or in the gaze of the eyes that I'm in conversation with, or in the quality of the field that's just like humming in a group of friends. The like crackle of the campfire. It's like in the simplicity of these very, in some ways, mundane experiences that feel most animated with soul for me right now, and it's been fun to lean into that.
Yeah. What comes up as I'm listening to both of you is this sense of um, it brings up the experience I have of writing, and also the experience of being, I watched my daughter's school musical, which is Hades Town. So there's a lot of these amazing like the gods
Mm,
and all these symbols. And um, my experience with writing is there's this sense of, well, let me put it this way. It was coming up for me initially with what you were sharing, Ari, and then some of the things that you said after, Tucker, where there's a sense of there's this illumination from beyond, but then there's also that meeting the human history. And in the book that I've been writing, there's a series of stories, and there's a point where they don't have soul, in my opinion. It's like it has maybe we call it the story bones. Like it has the must-haves for it to like be that story. Um, but I don't find it compelling.
mm,
And then somewhere around like the fifth draft, sixth draft, seventh draft, eighth draft, there's enough of the bones to like for something else to begin carving away with these inspirations and intuitions that are not cognitive at all. In fact, usually when I write a piece that later I'm like, that is good, I don't feel like I wrote it.
mm,
And it's not also like, oh, I don't know how to describe it because I don't mean to distance it from my own lived humanness, but it feels like I look at it and I'm like, I don't know how to put those words together like that.
mm,
But it's a beyond and a history,
mm,
which is what I feel is often happening in art. Like this story, Hades Town, it's basically a love story. These two people fall in love, but then they get torn apart. And, she goes down into the underworld and then he comes to find her. And then, he grapples with Hades to like, and then he plays this song that, la, 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 this melody that just came to him. And it turns out that this was a melody that Hades had sung when he was first in love with Persephone, but
Mm.
they had grown apart over the years and they had like sort of their love had become sort of gone into a kind of feeling of distance. And then this, he sings this song and Hades hears this melody and he's like, where did you hear that?
mm,
And he's like, oh, it just came to me. And then it opens up Hades' heart. And it's like working with these things that it's like you can feel the heavens, but you also feel the underworld. And
mm,
and for me, it's like feeling the history and the pain and the torment, and then the luminosity that doesn't ever have a problem. And somehow this is the dance of that
mm,
Ling character, and in that dance, then all of a sudden something starts to like the uncarved block starts to shape the world with the numinous.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
My girlfriend is actually doing a tattoo of Persephone right now for
Ah,
somebody.
love it.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just sensing, jazz and gospel and blues as three examples of genres that to me I often feel a lot of that quality of soul. And so much of those genres from my limited understanding is really birthed from pain or history that has involved suffering and being in the underworld in the darkness of reality's expression that is yeah, painful. And um yeah, it's all in my imaginally right now I'm seeing soul as a flickering flame of hope in a dark world, or in a scene of darkness, it's like a lighthouse, you could say, or like a candle flame. And it's almost so faint, but in a way the it's in this seeing right now, it's so small relative to the totality of, say, the void. but it's also, and somehow paradoxically the largest thing, like, or it's the biggest on some other scale of like measurement. It's the biggest thing. It's like the heart, like the, you could even say the human heart is one small organ in this large body, but somehow it's seen or just known as the totality of the body simultaneously. And there's just something around feeling soul as that, like it's something that maybe we can describe as like coming and going or having moments of being dialed up or dialed down, but also when it's there, it's known as the totality of all that it is, of all that is simultaneously.
Mm.
um, and yet because of that, there's almost an okayness with losing it, or releasing it, or not holding on to it, and like trusting that it's a dancing flame, and it'll catch our hearts and our eyes when it's meant to, and go back into the darkness when it needs to. And yeah, maybe that's like the underworld, upper world, or that kind of I see it like an infinity loop, you know. And it's just like this process of birth and death, and all the polarities of reality kind of come into this waterfall. It's like this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it occurs to me, my daughter, I'm just bringing this image back up just because I feel that we've all been describing it in various ways, and so I just wanted to bring the gestures back. Um, my daughter's school, a couple times throughout the year, the students will do plays, and they don't talk about it as doing a ritual. That's a very particular language. They also don't talk about it as like doing a practice, which is like another way we might use the word ritual, but without using that word. But another way is like, I mean, it's called a play. They're intentionally coming together to play and to dance in a way that they don't always dance. And so, and then what does that evoke? What aspects of it's funny, I first want to say what aspects of human possibility, but there's a way that it feels like it's human possibility and also beyond. Like it feels like there's a sense of something beyond. It's like we're evoking different aspects of the invisible.
Mm,
And so my
love
like for
that.
example, my daughter, she and three of her friends, they played the Fates. And these Fates, they have a certain look in their eye. And sometimes they go "Sss," and they have this sort of quality about them that I know the three girls that uh, Sophie was being Fates with, and none of their dispositions are really like that. And if I were to say, "Hey, Sophia, when we go out tonight, why don't you embody this kind of Fate's quality?" She would be like, "You've got to be kidding. There's no way I'm going to do that." But in the
Mm.
context of a play, everybody dances a little differently. And it's like it pulls down these different
Ah.
aspects uh, of light, at least how I experience it. It's like these different aspects of light, but it mixes with the human and it mixes with being of this planet, of this ecology. And then we all get to experience that as human beings. And there's a way also, it occurs to me, that there's something safe about it. It's like there's a lot of things that we would do as humans that maybe others would say we were crazy if we did, unless it was a play or unless it was painted on a canvas. It's like all of a sudden you're allowed to do that. Like this guy that played Hades, it was they cast it perfectly. And he's just, and he's like this darkness and like evoking the quality of dark red light. And if he were to do that in the middle of Costco, people would start like saying, "You're not allowed to do that. You're acting crazy. Like, should we put you in an institution?" But in this context, he gets to dance he gets to be the shaman in that certain way, and it evokes something, this certain quality of ruby light that not only moves him, but it moves all of us. We get to feel those qualities that maybe we're not usually allowed to when we're sort of in the normative
Mm.
kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exploding things within me. Yeah. Yeah, I've so many threads to touch on. I'll see if I can
Mhm,
swim through them. Um, yeah, we keep coming back to this through the symbols, through what Tucker was sharing, through what you were sharing, Alexander. I keep seeing the like classic shamanic triplet, which is like lower, middle, upper,
mhm,
right? Um, and the various world trees of the various cultures are often pointing to this. And the Greeks, of course, they don't treeify it, but they kind of, you know, Olympus and Zeus, and then, kind of the worldly affairs and the underworld. And it's from the Siberian shamans to the Aztecs to the Hawaiians, this is a triplet that likes to reproduce itself. Even Freud has given it some German names, like sub, id, ego, superego, whatever. But there's this way in which maybe in a, yeah, how you showed that realm of life, or sorry, realm of matter, realm of life, and then the sacred gap. Yeah, the Buddhists, they also kind of conceive of it to some degree like this. There's like the hell realm, which is just like infinite suffering, the hungry ghost realm, which is like constant desiring and grasping with like no awareness of it. The animal realm, which is just like rote, like execution of similar tasks. Then there's this gap, which is the human realm, which there's enough suffering and enough liberation to lead to something interesting. And then on the other side, you tip over the scales again. You have the asuras or the jealous gods who are kind of constantly in this battle with each other, and then the devas who just are in infinite bliss until they die. And there's something about being human. It's like, you know, our culture maybe thinks of aliens like this, or maybe previous cultures would have thought of ethereal beings or devas or ascended masters or something like this. But there's like these realms below us that are less agentive. Like atoms ostensibly are kind of bound by certain physical laws that if you crank up the heat in your oven, the atoms aren't like, yeah, I'm not gonna like get excited right now. They like have to get like hot and kinetic. And as you go up the stack, you get a bit more agency. But, a lot of animals, their soul is, you could almost argue it's a biological soul. Like they are a hawk and they have expressed as a hawk. And the hawkness, like, kind of does the hawk thing, and it's kind of constrained to some degree by maybe the biology can only catch a certain amount of spirit and manifest it, but it's catching a certain flavor of spirit. And this actor that is called Hawk is like perfectly costumed for the role, and it just like does the Hawk thing. And there's something interesting about humans in that we all have this shamanic quality, regardless of whether we're the neurodivergent shaman in the community or not. Every human being has this gap. Every human being has much more agency over the roles that we can play. And the history of our evolution, the new spheric evolution or cultural evolution, is like these different plays that we've put on. It's like, okay, tallest, strongest guy is going to sit at the front of the room and boss all the other tall, strong guys around. And the tall, strong guys are going to like treat the like small dudes who are like brainy this way. And like, all right, cool. And like that play works for a while, but it's a play and it has costumes and actors and da 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 da. Da. Um, and so, some of them, what I would regard as maybe some of the more advanced cultures, yeah, are highly reflective of that and use play in an esoteric context to liberate and illuminate and poke at the plays that we unconsciously get ourselves into, or maybe consciously get ourselves into because they keep society in a certain level of functioning, or they keep the show on the road. but by creating kind of these esoteric pockets, like in ancient Greece at Eleusis, which was about, the Persephone myth, statesmen, aristocrats, generals, these sorts of people, philosophers, would make this pilgrimage on foot to this temple where they would imbibe in this substance called the kykeon or kukion, and they would go into an altered state and be surrounded by actors and players who would be in various costumes who would take them on an underworld journey as Persephone did to go be with Hades and then be reborn in the spring. And it was this actual embodied experiential theatrical production um, that subverts the norms of normal societies. And, people were executed in Greece for talking about it or for revealing its secrets or for talking about the ingredients in the brew. And it was held with this level of sacredness
Mm.
um, that, the famous, all the great Greek philosophers would point back to Eleusis and say, if you haven't experienced Eleusis, like, what do you really know? And these sorts of
Mm.
things. So yeah, these are some threads I'm
Love it.
feeling lit up by.
I love it. Yeah, there's so much richness in there. The
Mhm.
one of the things I wanted to touch on to sort of weave this into physiology is the way that they often look. One way to look at this from an Eastern perspective is the three bony cavities. The lower bony cavity, the middle bony cavity, and the upper bony cavity.
Hmm.
The lower bony cavity is the terrestrial. The terrestrial. It's all mysterious. It's like just peering into the vastness of the ocean, into the depths. You don't see what's there. It's all mystery. And, some people will point to the morphology of the sacrum. It's like a downward facing triangle, a terra facing triangle. And then you have I like to call it the celestial dome. Um, you'll see these images of meditators that have these really long heads, and it's depicting that there's like you'll hear in the Bible, like I think the phrase is something like in my father's home are many mansions, and so the invitation is that you go in to this celestial dome, and some other traditions will talk about many heavens, or that character for Shen. um, what I was describing is like the luminous fruits. Often it's interpreted as those little things that are coming down from that single line. It's the sun and the moon and the stars. And so we have the concrete depiction of that where we can see the sun and the moon and the stars of these luminous fruits hanging from heaven. But we also have traditions that once you go into the eye center, some of the things you begin to connect in with are these qualities of luminosity that look kind of like stars in a night sky or sort of like the moon or the sun. And then, of course, you have the occiput, which is a roughly shaped upward facing, heaven facing triangle. And then they talk about the middle bony cavity. These are the rhythmic organs, right? This is the realm of humanity. So you've got the heart and the lungs. They both have the polarities, the in breath and the out breath, the uh, arterial flow and the venous return. And so there's sort of they'll look at the symbology here of that. You have the underworld, just as you were describing. You have either the underworld or you have the vast mystery of the ocean, depending on sort of what pocket of experience we're wanting to touch into. In either case, it's mysterious. And then you have the sort of heavenly canopy. And then you have the human that is precisely both. That again, it's not a noun, it's a process of interfacing with and being an intermediary between. And again, that's where we see the dancing shamans, the heavens are raining, and then the layer of humanity in that character is the open mouths, the 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 open heart mind that's, kind of this mixing of the soil and the sky.
Yeah, I keep getting this image of like gems in the earth when you're talking about it. Like they're created by pressure deep in the ground and they can't be seen and they have to kind of be excavated and mined for and it's dangerous and you have to go down to find these jewels, these fruits of the earth. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, there's something you were saying, Tucker, about the pain or like a descent being required to like
Yeah.
really encounter soul. Like if you meet a sage who is just like beaming, just like universal love, there isn't that like bass note of soul as much. I feel like that comes through the unique individual, which is almost
Mm.
like gems in the ground, the uniqueness that we have to die to kind of uncover.
Mhm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I'm there's so much that's just been said in the past few moments that I could comment on, but the thing that's still sticking with me is, or you said something like, if you know, you know, like, or if you don't know, you don't know. And there's just something about that. I kind of like the exclusivity of that in a way, or the hard boundary of that, because it feels like it could psychoactively motivate some force to want to know. And yeah, I don't know. I was talking to somebody at a concert last night, and they were asking me what type of gatherings I host and stuff, and I was like, man, it really sucks to describe it because like, well, it's a group of people, we're friends, we get together, we hang out around the campfire, we have great conversations. But I'm like, it's not really any of that. It's just knowing. It's like when you're in the field and you feel that you're like, oh, this is why we're here. And there's like that, yeah, that bass note of soul that kind of comes through. And it's like it feels more like a remembrance than an arriving. But also there's a way in which it feels like a evolutionary process as well. It's like maybe a spiral where it feels like the same like ensoulment is happening, but through this process as well. And yeah, just thinking about what you were sharing with the plays and, like Burning Man, like there's just always that experience of like going out into the playa and just being like, oh, yeah, we don't actually have words in the English language to describe this. Like we can gesture towards it, but it's something that's just happening. And, with these different, yeah, you mentioned the pilgrimage aspect. And I was just had a moment of feeling my extreme privilege of being like, it's so hard to get to Burning Man. It costs so much money, and there's dust storms, and you have to set up tents, and it's, physically exhausting and it's costly. But even in the most privileged version of that, like where you're talking about jazz earlier, where maybe it's like more from, centuries of slavery. And so that's one extreme. And then maybe another extreme is just like, uh, privileged white dudes going to Burning Man, but still there's an aspect of a trial
Right.
that's being asked of us, and in that process, there's like some reward that one arrives to, or usually I experience it as like a more. It's not so personal at that moment. It's like collective or transpersonal or wholeness, or but there's this like a sense of a homecoming to a place that's, yeah, remembered as like the heart of the heart, or the gem at the center of the earth, or the seed at the center of the oak tree. And it's like, oh, we're in souled right now, like we're in soul. um yeah, this is some of what's coming up.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, so uh, some of the things that you've both been sharing, I wanted to bring in this next image, which on the right, it shows um, basically to give birth to or to engender. In the Tao Te Ching, when it says the Tao gives birth to one, one gives birth to two, two gives birth to three, and so on, the word for gives birth to is this word and or this image, and it shows a plant with a budding. It's like a growing plant with a little bud, and then the character on the left is a character for the heart. It's a certain way to draw it. It's more of a like a reduced form. Sometimes they'll change the characters to for various reasons, but this is you could call it the radical for the heart. And so this character could be translated as nature. What's your nature? And essentially, you can say, well, okay, well, one's nature is that which has been born in one's heart. And the interesting thing is that this character for nature is used in two different ways, at least. It's more than two, but I'll describe two. One is it's your true nature. And if that's the Dharmakaya, right? So this word can be used in that way. They'll, you could put next to it your root nature. It shows like the character for a tree, but the roots has a little horizontal line that's emphasizing the root aspect of it. But this same character can be used as like your unique nature. Like what's your one of my teachers, Jeffrey Yuen, would talk about it as your curriculum. And this is another aspect of soul, this sort of, and Ari, you mentioned some things that reminded me of this earlier, and then Tucker just now as you were speaking, it's like there's a sense of something in me that wants to be explored. And this could be artistic. Like I must paint, like my wife Veronica, like she has to paint. I do not have to paint. I do have to write, right? There's something like there's something like that.
Hmm.
But it can also be like these themes, that human beings go through. Like if we could use the like the Enneagram as an example, where you have these various we have these types of being that predispose us to certain interpretations, certain ways that pain impacts us. They have the five elements in the Chinese medicine tradition, the five those five types. We have the five Buddha families. It's all the same thing where that luminosity, or to use Buddhist language, the Sambhogakaya comes through the human heart and then takes on this kind of unique disposition. The
Hmm.
seeds that haven't yet come to fruition, that I feel this talonic pull, this purposeful. Sometimes
Hmm.
people will define the word telos more traditionally as like a goal or an end purpose. I like to redefine it as purposefulness.
Hmm.
That I find it works a little better for me when wanting to situate the notion of telos into an evolutionary context. There's all
Hmm.
these people love to argue about, like, does evolution have telos? And some people get very uncomfortable with that. If what telos means is like a predetermined end, I like the notion of purposefulness. And then we have this sense of purposefulness that
Hmm.
leads us into certain directions, that leads us. Now, also, I like to think of this as unique individual nature, right? So that luminosity is coming through the individual and wants to come to fruition in a certain way. But then we also have like a particular collective
Hmm.
that has a shared kind of soul shared soul, you could say soul connection, or there's a shared impulse that's
Hmm.
beyond the like, hey, we want to do this thing together, but there's something else that feels like a resonant yes that
Hmm.
that sort of gathers us into a sort of shared communion.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my favorite topic in the world. So, uh, yeah, it's also one of my playful pet peeves with, say, in the integral or the even the stages community or some of the Buddhist and non-dual communities is, there's a lot of talk about spiritual awakening and ego development, but there's less explicit framings around the maturation and the unfolding process of soul. And to me, yeah, it's interesting from some of the constructing consciousness gatherings when I had all these golden shadow projections of what kind of meta this or something, some turquoise or whatever the label was, and just sort of recognizing that the people that I felt most resonant aliveness with on a very basic level were those who I felt like there was some teeming aliveness in their soul. And there were others who had like extraordinarily deep and realized non-dual um, you know, they're orienting from non-dual states or whatever, and others who are developmentally, kind of off the charts relative to um, the human population. But it was almost like that when those don't have an ensoulment that is also like reaching out into the world or as the world and like grabbing it and like moving something and putting your hands in the soil or you're like doing something that has some sort of robustness of aliveness that I felt like there was a gap or something missing. Um, and so, yeah, everything you just shared, Alexander, just really, really lands. And for the Source Keepers Guild, we've created a model of soul development. It's largely based off Bill Plotkin's work, but we used our own language and we added a stage. And yeah, it's not something that I see as the specificity of the way that we've constructed it isn't so important, but it's more just about planting seeds within the psyche of the network that we're a part of, that soul is not just ego development and it's not just spiritual awakening, but it can be seen and experienced as a third gesture that is able to bring both of those other things into some sort of a unique gift that has a flavor of aliveness that is magnetically attractive just by its sheer vitality. And it's sexy, like it's sexy and it's often playful and it's also often dramatic and it's often exquisitely simple and like that perfect um that perfect simplicity where it almost hurts because it's just so perfect. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost painful because it's just right. It's just like hitting the acupuncture needle exactly in the right point. And I feel like soul is what has the power to really do that. But it's doing it almost through its own intelligence, more so than there's like the act of, yeah, there's almost a sense of like being entranced by this intelligence that just knows. Um, and that itself is deeply pleasurable.
It reminds me of a book. I haven't read this for so long, Steppenwolf.
I haven't read
And
it.
yeah, well, it's been a long time, so I'll miss sort of many of the details, but there's one piece that was arriving when you were speaking is, this guy's life is kind of dry and stale and there's not a lot of soul in it. And there's this he sees this sign and it says for madmen only. And again, I'm gonna skip all. I mean, I read this in high school. It's like so long ago, but there's something about how at some point, his life is very dry, it's very stale. It's like, it's not, it doesn't have that aliveness. And then at some point he learns how to dance. And he learns how to dance and he enters into this world with the ancients.
Mhm.
And then there's like all this, all of a sudden, which for me at the time, and reading tends to be difficult for me anyway, but for me at the time, the first bit of the book was really hard to get through. And then all of a sudden, he eventually enters this place that's for madmen only, and the ancient ones are there. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I could finally understand the book,
Mhm.
and it felt like it totally opened. And there's
Mhm.
this thing where, I think you're spot on that we can have ego development and we can have a incredible degree of complexity, but that doesn't mean that we've nurtured this soul depth. I
Mhm.
think some of the later waves of development have relative easy access to it if they wanted to turn in that direction,
Mhm.
because it is part of a depth dimension in how I understand soul. But when awakened awareness is foregrounded or some sort of a transcendence state or identity is foregrounded, it doesn't necessarily mean that that soul is foregrounded. And I can honor that. For some people, that's their path. But for me, there's a need to be able to step into that, for mad people only. It's not that anybody's barred from entry, but
Mhm,
but there's no barring from entry. It's just there's a leap into the imaginal,
mhm,
into the being struck by lightning on Earth, which is different than uh, leaving this world for heaven, which, by the way, I'm not against. I mean, I know most people in the current sort of modern spiritual uh, folks tend to not be okay with transcending the world. I'm actually
mhm,
totally fine with that as an option.
mhm,
But there's also this thing of like being here and being struck by lightning rather
mhm,
than leaping out towards lightning. And in my practices, I in my life, I do both.
mhm.
They're both valid. Um, but there's something different. There's like root vegetables that are like, turning into demons that are like making poetry and then like turning into angels. And, there's, I don't know. It's hard to put into words, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe just one little thing is it's helpful for me to feel feel with soul as the wholeness, soul, the soul of wholeness, or the wholeness of soul, and that, not expressing soul in kind of a relative, um, from a relative human perspective, is part of the dance of soul itself, as the totality of what is. And that's part of the beauty, is like that contrast also, like when you walk into a department store or something and it's just fluorescent lighting and you're just like, whoa, okay, this is a vibe, and but
Yeah.
it's the contrast of that with the Alicia Keys NPR Tiny Desk performance, where you're like, okay, and that contrast is part of the beauty of the wholeness, that needs one another in order to like remember themselves as distinct and part of the whole simultaneously.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Ari was saying before, where it's like we like engage in these play, like we step into a disposition when we are doing a play,
Mhm.
and sometimes I walk into one of those stores like Michael's or something, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm in a hell realm. Like that's how it lands in my being. It's like fluorescent lights and like tacky flowers and like this whole thing. But if I, as you're speaking and I'm sort of resonating with what Ari was sharing before, it's like if I see that as the disposition of the like, you know, the soul of Target, there's a way in which it's like, oh, there's like a thing that's happening here that I could find delight and magic in, uh, especially when there's the contrast.
Mhm. Yeah.
Otherwise, I might fade into a beige or something.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a few things that came up. I have some themes that are swimming around, and then kind of a question, a question for you too. Also, just that point about the ancient ones, or the for madmen only, that hit. Yeah, that hit. I feel like often when I feel like I'm really being animated by soul, I call it the night show, because there's a Travis Scott song that talks about anything can happen at the night show. And this concept of like the carnival is terrifying and it's joyful and it's so mundane. Like there's someone just like sweeping up popcorn. There's kids
Mhm.
having like the most terrifying experience of their life on like the roller coaster. There's a couple fighting. There's
Mhm.
couples in bliss eating cotton candy, going on their first date. Like to me, in some of the deeper states, reality has kind of shown me maybe what the Buddhists called samsara, as like a carnival, like that archetype, which has all this Buddhist mythology around it, but that same seed archetype of a wheel of delight and terror and yeah, like delight and terror irrevocably linked,
Mhm.
you know. A modern way of seeing that is like the carnival, I think.
Mm.
Or that's come through me. And there's something theatrical about that. Um yeah, it feels like in that space between in that yeah, the night show to me is when it's like something like tips over, like something numinous tips over, and it's like, oh, the people I'm around, it's not just Tucker and Ethan and Hannah, whoever. It's like these are the ancient ones. This is the always Tucker, like the part of reality that's always tuckering or doing the tuckering, and the part of reality that's Johning or dogging or and it's they're each holding a different piece of this mystery play that we call life. And I'm seeing myself in that, not as much more so as an actor of being like, oh, I'm the Ari in this scene. And like the Ari has like specific things that the Ari does. And it's hyper personal and totally impersonal at the same time. Layman sometimes calls that hyper personal. It's like sincerely ironic. It's like so me, and I'm also like so just like playing this part. And yeah, that realm or that state just came to me, as you said, for Mad Men only and the ancient ones. And yeah, there's something about soul, which is like I used to have a picture of an Oscar on next to my bathroom in my mirror at my parents' house. It's not because I wanted to be in movies, but because as these things started to come in through me, there was a sense that there's a role that I'm needed to play in the larger play. And I want to win. I want to get the Oscar for that role. For like whoever my soul has been cast in, like I want to like knock that out of the park. And I think that's what brings in some of the darkness and some of the stakes. Like, like hippies, someone who's just wandering, hippie meaning just someone who's wandering, going to various festivals, going to the Bali, whatever circuit, smoking a bunch of weed, randomly taking psychedelics. It's like there aren't really that many stakes. So there's not that much like soul. It's like where is this going? What story is this a part of? It's like hard to see who that person is because it's just like kind of floating. But there's a verticality that comes in when it's like, oh, there are stakes. There's a mission, there's a thing going on. And then that kind of like snaps the being into a role of like, okay, now given that there's a there's a polarity, there's a becoming that needs to happen, and there's a role that needs to be fulfilled.
Is it okay if I share one more image? I'm
Please.
sort of I've been playing this game where I'm uh, waiting for you guys and me included to describe these gestures, and then I'll show it. And it's been working well so far. So I want before you say, I know there's more you wanted to say, but I just wanted to
Totally.
share this one image here. This is an image that can be translated as uh, destiny. Some people will translate it as fate. Some people, which destiny and fate in this context would be different. Sometimes it's translated as life. And if you look at an earlier oracle bone depiction of it, what you see is a voice that's sort of uh, expressing a command to someone who's kneeling, right? So you have this notion here of it's a mouth, right? Uh, it's the command from heaven, right? So if we were to translate this in a mythic context, you could say like the Lord's command or the Lord's will. It sounds very fate-like. But another way you can look at this is the expression of the primordial impulse, whether we call that logos or whether we call that the Sambhogakaya or whether we call that the evolutionary impulse. There's something that's coming from the unborn potentiality, and it's it's a voice that is when it moves again through this, it connects with the that character I showed you for nature, Xing, it's called. When it connects and moves through the Xing, there's a sense of I must, whatever the I must is, right? There's a generative impulse to become, and when we look in this look at this character in the context of calling it destiny rather than fate, rather than something fixed. There's this sense of fulfilling destiny means that I am being the exact expression of who I am at this deeper level. I'm successfully expressing that right now. It's not like I'm fulfilling my destiny if I finish the book.
Hmm.
That might be an expression of that, but that the actual fulfillment of destiny came in each little bursts of each little moment where I'm authentically being myself. That's giving rise to what this evolutionary impulse
Yeah.
is how it's becoming through my human soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing on that?
Yeah, you can say a million things on that.
Okay. I wanna jump back to you and
No, no,
Ari and
I'm
just say that. Okay. A move that I absolutely love what you just said. I feel that feels yeah, that is my direct experience of reality. I feel like soul is interesting to talk about, but it's there was a death to soul process that happened where it's just like soul just is, I guess you could say. And but yeah, and I think I've made this own move previously, which is essentially being like, well, it's already always happening right now. And so therefore the kind of striving towards that which might not be here in some way is not like that was kind of an illusion or a delusion, or that's something you have to let go of. That's an attachment, that's karma, blah, blah, blah. And there's something in the fulfillment of the moment to moment blooming of soul as already realizing itself as itself in this like kind of timeless yes feeling that to me is not contradictory with the deep earnest like knees on the ground, hands bloody, striving our way as best as we can with humility and imperfection towards that which in many real ways is also not here, is also not yet fully incarnated in the form that is being desired or longed for, and that is also destined to become, in part because of that very gesture of reaching towards that which is not destined in some paradoxical way. And so, yeah, in my moment to moment life, you could say that's all of those contradictions and paradoxes have been worked through, at least in most days. And there's just a sense of like it just feels like one whole movement that is happening, that is a happening, that is the happening. But in the process of coming to know that movement, I feel like it's helpful to kind of look at each of the different sub movements of that system. You could say, I don't know, it's weird to frame it as a system, but of that totality, in order to kind of get to know the contours of this process. And yeah, I really it all feels important. It all feels like all the ways in which you become intimate with one shape of that feels like it's part of some larger whole unfolding that's happening. And there's something exquisite about that.
Hmm, beautiful. So I wonder, as we start moving towards pausing, is there anything else that you wanted to share, Ari or Tucker?
I have a question for Ari. You framed this earlier. You shared about a big decision that was made, professionally, but also personally, and um, that was like a soul level decision. And I guess what I'm curious about is who do you see yourself becoming from the dimension of soul as a response or as a ripple of that decision that was made. And like, yeah, potentially even just offering that as a prayer for the future destiny that is you.
Mm. Yeah, kind of a meta comment that comes up to that, and then there's the specific, which is, yeah, I was actually thinking so much as we were, well, this conversation has definitely been a part of that unfolding, and just having space to play with these things has been generative for me in this time of transition. And one of the things I wrote down was like I feel like I'm the way the Dharma is learning itself in me is through story, is through narrative, is through theater. And I think the frame in which I relate to what's happening to me is almost like a movie critic. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, interesting. That happened. So this is what they're setting up. Like oh, there was this foreshadowing of this thing, but now this other thing happened. So the timeline of that thing is speeding up. Okay, this character is gonna get in the, I'm kind of that's how I experience myself is yeah. In my personal mythology, there are like directors who you could think of as like archangels. There's like the one who like is just like laughing, eating popcorn, watching itself die and explode and go through meat grinders and also make love and become president and whatever. Like there's the one who's just like eating popcorn, like holy shit, this is crazy. And also this is terrifying. It's everything. So it almost has no opinion. It's like Tucker. Um, I just have to get you every time. But then there's these different facets of wholeness that want different outcomes. Some of them want to break down and dissolve. Some of them want to give birth. Some of them want to sustain. And they're all in this. You could call those the five elements, or however you want to think of them, the seasons, or anyways, these directors, and they're planting seeds for me and whatnot. So yeah, I was working for a kind of powerful spiritual teacher and kind of apprenticing to him. And I think the way I felt like the story was going was that by me kind of giving my young life force for a period of years to this being, it would help kind of him get over the line, like kind of almost like as we're trying to give birth to a new culture and a new way of relating to each other and being in the world, that like the elders are kind of like holding the deepest seeds of this. And so if I give my like sunshine and water and life to that seed, that will be like the pressure point that will open the most blossoming for the whole system. And that's kind of like what was being asked of me was like almost like a kneeling knight posture of the king has like the battle plan, like put my sword like behind him. And what's as I did that enough, it came to the point where it's like, oh, I actually don't think that's the most efficient place to put my kind of life force. And so the story seems to be moving much more towards a collective emergence, much and a bit more of a younger center to the movement. And then that younger center, which is kind of distributed, like myself, Tucker, and other collaborators are who are all holding kind of a piece of it, but are coming at all of this from like a really deep focus on relationality being kind of primary and like relationship being the main arena through which all development happens and even through which soul unfolds. In that often it requires other people to make these things happen. And then the manifestation of what wants to come through you is often actually a relational unfolding, or it's just the relationship between inner parts or relationship between things like this. But the relationship in the heart is kind of primary. And as that kind of hums and becomes more cohered, it will cohere the elders in our community and the children and the young ones who are looking for their arena. our heart will kind of cohere them as opposed to more getting our Gen X elders over the line into their fullest soul expression is like the thing that builds the Taurus of like regenerative cyclical civilization. It's more actually like Gen Z millennials coming into their full soul expression are that's like birthing the correct sets, stages, environments for the elders to actually come and play the role of elders as opposed to more so the old model. Um, and yeah, I think yeah, I'm holding just part of like the meta framing around that and the theatrical nature of all that. And yeah, I think I'm being asked to step up into like a different role than I thought in the play. It was like, okay, I'm more the supporting character to this like main character. And it's like, oh, maybe actually I'm one of many main characters in a different sort of play.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah, beautiful.
Beautiful.
Tucker, anything that you wanted to?
Mm,
Thank you, Ari. It's beautifully said.
mhm,
Thank you for letting me share that.
mm. Yeah, I'm just maybe a prayer I'll end with is be really, yeah, it'd just be really cool to, I mean, I'm experiencing it now, you could say, but of feeling future generations where there's no need to have a podcast about soul because it's like having a podcast about blue skies or something, or like it's like, yeah, the sky is blue. Like, what else is there to talk about? But it's just so, yeah, and there feels like there from a historical, epochal kind of human history lens that there's maybe a coming back into contact or intimacy with this that I think is there in everything, and but maybe like the explicit orientation around it has a quality of re-emerging something that was a little bit muddled in the water or something like that. And I appreciate that this podcast has been one fractal expression um, of that journey. So thank you, Alexander, for initiating it, and Ari for being here with
Yeah,
your beautiful wisdom.
thank you both. My sense is that um, as this world becomes more and more technologized, and we see all the gifts of AI, and we see all of these amazing things emerge that are human artifacts rather than expressions of being human. I think that um, more and more there's going to be a yearning for what you're describing, Tucker. I mean, I actually think there's a yearning already,
Yeah,
but I don't know how often it's articulated that that's a missing piece.
yeah,
Um, and I think that there's an opportunity here for us to for us to explore what it means to be ensouled, and
hmm,
that there is a stark difference between being ensouled and walking around in a way where we are wandering and don't know we're wandering.
hmm,
And it tends to be the disenchantment of modernity's shadow, and I hear an invitation um, to play more. And part of entering that place for mad men only or mad people only, there's a risk to be taken by things that are deeply feeling places that take us into the mystery and majesty of being human and the creation of art.
hmm. Beautiful.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
beautiful, beautiful conversation.
Thank you guys so
Yeah,
much.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.